Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Circle Up and Get Real, where we talk about things that matter with people who matter. And today, my guest is Jessie Torres. And you and I, Jessie, have a ton of things in common. It sounds like in the way we have come to be coaches and recognize that there's more to life than what our suffering would have us believe. And so I just want to give a little bit of a background to those of you listening. Jessie has been in the peak performance life coaching space for the last 20 plus years, and she's coached thousands of high performance people from all walks of life in various parts of the world that have achieved success and the highest level of fulfillment. And I know we're going to find out from you how you got here, Jessie, but you have a lot of really interesting certifications, including ones with Tony Robbins, who I'm sure we all know of if we're listening to this podcast. And just your program sounds great. Fierce Grace program. Her company's called Fierce Grace. So, I mean, with that background, I'd like to just welcome you and
Thank you
say
so
hi.
much.
Thanks, Jessie, for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to connect.
So we've talked only once before. We're kind of new friends here, but I feel like we really connected on a lot of topics. And before we started recording, we started talking about trauma. And I know, let's just jump right in, right? So trauma, I mentioned to you that I'm hearing that term much more easily than I ever used to. And I can't pinpoint when I started hearing that. But I think all of us have some sort of trauma in our lives, from whatever it might have been. And you mentioned a resource that you've been following that you said has brought this to the forefront a little bit more. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And I'm so grateful that you bring that into the space because Gabor Mate is a gentleman he's a psychologist. He's got all kinds of degrees, who's now bringing and speaking about trauma. He's bringing it to the forefront. So I think it's more people are more able to like talk about it, say that they have trauma. And what I'd like to make clear is that oftentimes trauma is described or people think it's like a big rape or something, which of
Yeah.
course it is.
Sure.
However, I have a definition for trauma with the work that I do that is basically trauma is whatever the child made meaning of in the moment of the experience,
Mm.
right? Like we don't realize that we have these anchor points in our journey where we've created meaning around something that we didn't know was going to affect us years later.
Mm.
And I use a simple example of a little boy going to the grocery store with his mother and playing in the aisle of the grocery store. Mom goes to the end of the aisle to grab something. She could see him, but he can't see her.
Mm.
He lifts up his head and screams, "Mom!" She's right there, less than 10 seconds. But in that moment, he anchored abandonment. I could be
Mm.
left behind. I could be left alone. What if? Right. So now he's a little bit more clingy when mom goes to the
Mhm.
store, doesn't want her to leave his sight.
Mhm.
Now he's 35 and wonders why he can't keep a relationship because he's insecure, he's scared, he's jealous and controlling.
Yeah.
Right. All because of that moment that he didn't even know in his unconscious conditioning created the meaning I could be left behind.
Mhm.
No abuse, nothing, huge. But again, as human beings, we do make meaning out of our experiences in
Yeah.
an unconscious way that we don't even recognize.
Yeah. Oh man, that is such a good example. Because you're right. I think my stuff is just as important to my development as somebody who actually did have the trauma you've mentioned earlier, the rape or the incest or the, witnessing a murder or something like that. Those are monumental. But just because I didn't have that doesn't mean I don't have trauma. So that's really a
Yeah,
great
that's what I
distinction.
call undiagnosed trauma.
Mm.
I think there's three levels that are super important. It's undiagnosed, unacknowledged, and then unresolved.
Oh.
When you have those three in the traumas, first undiagnosed, he doesn't know why he can't keep a relationship, right? When we start to work together, we start to have that conversation and I can find that invisible thread that goes back to a moment where he thought he was going to be left behind.
Mm.
Now, the unacknowledged trauma is sometimes to your point, like if somebody that let's say they do have a rape or they do have incest or something like that, like they know they have that. So, that knowing
Mm,
bypasses the healing oftentimes.
mm,
It's like, "Oh, yeah, I know everything, so I forgave and I I went to therapy, so I'm good," right? They're not noticing all the things that happen after the fact from that trauma or from 100 other traumas that happen as a result of it.
mhm,
You know what I mean? And so that's why it's like it's acknowledged on one level, but not acknowledged on all the other levels and how that happens.
mhm,
For instance, I got married when I was 18. I was leaving, I was escaping my father at
mm,
that time because he was still coming after me. So I went into this marriage with total transparency. I had this thing happen with my dad. He had an alcoholic mother, and we both talked about it. It was very blatant. And we're like, okay, cool. So I'm never going to have my children be molested. He said, my kids will never see me drunk. And we thought we fixed it.
mm. Oh,
Right? So
mm,
we have all this other unacknowledged trauma that we didn't know we
mm.
were bringing into the marriage,
Sure.
So, and then of course it stays unresolved.
Right, right. Wow. Okay, so you really we're just jumping right in here, aren't we?
We
And getting into it.
are.
So with that, then is that how you came to this career, this work that you're doing through your own journey?
Very much. Yes. It was a state of my life where I was apathetic, shut down. I did not believe there was an escape, there was a way out. I was wishing someone would blow the red light so I could be done in this life. Divorce
Mm,
wasn't an option. And I didn't know that there could be another way. And so the only way was death. I didn't, I wasn't suicidal because I didn't want to do that to my kids. But
mhm.
I was suicidal in the way where I just want it to be done. Somebody do it for me. And then
Wow.
I was, saying, What if a plane crashes when he takes a trip?" And I was like feeling
Mm,
guilt and shame over thinking such a horrible thing. But it would be okay if I was the widow. You know what I mean? But that's kind
mm,
of the convincing that starts to go in there. And you know, it it was an act of kindness, Jody, that got me to wake up.
mm,
An act of kindness that at the time, I didn't know to call it kindness. All I knew is it short-circuited me. Whatever little light I still had left in my spirit was fanned in that moment when these people acted kindly, and I thought, "I don't even know what this is, but if this feeling is available, then life is worth living."
um,
And from that moment, gave me the courage to leave my marriage and then created it just woke up an insatiable hunger to understand. I want to understand human beings. I want to know why my dad did what he did, why my mom ignored it, why my husband did what he did, and why I allowed it. And I went to therapy, I read books, I went to seminars. I mean, I just dove in with all of me wanting to understand. And when I started to see that I would go to lunch. I worked in corporate for 15 and a half years. And, I'd go to lunch with one of the ladies and I'm sitting there talking and I'm just talking. And they'd be like, "Oh my God, that's really good. Let me write that down." Or
mm,
they'd be like, "Where do I leave my $10 copay?" And I was just like, and I remember walking away from that lunch going, I felt more excited than they did. Like I was
mm,
like, something I shared, something I said inspired somebody. And made them see a greater outcome or a greater version of themselves, and I was lit up.
mm.
And then it just ultimately cultivated in me wanting to understand how do I get here? How do I help people?
What were you doing in corporate at the time?
I was an insurance broker. I worked
Okay.
with insurance brokers, so
Yeah.
I would go out to corporations and bring in their employee benefits.
Okay. So a very respectable corporate job, like we all
Mhm.
do. You get a job, you're responsible and you do your job. And I don't know about you, Jesse, but I had a point in my career where it occurred to me that work didn't have to be a slog and
Mhm.
I didn't have to work so I could make money to do things I loved. At one point in my career, there was like an intersection where I was like, you mean I can do something I love and get paid for it?
Yeah.
And it sounds like you might have had that kind of an experience in the break room where you were lit up by something that wasn't necessarily related to insurance.
Well, what's interesting is that equally at the time that that happened, I was also having heart palpitations. I was losing clumps of hair in my shower. I actually went to the doctor, wore a 24-hour monitor, and sure enough, they said, "Yeah, you're having your heart's, it's doing that, skipping that beat." And, I had mentioned to them my work because I was there till 8 o'clock at night.
Mm.
I would go home on Saturdays, come home till 2, I mean, it was just, it was very demanding. And, uh, and so they knew it was stress related. And they said, okay, so what we can do is we can put you on beta blockers that you can take to calm your heart down. And I'm like, okay, wait, so you want to give me a pill that I have to take for the rest of my life to calm my heart down and I can keep my stress? I'm
Good.
like, that does not make sense to me. And I actually quit 2 weeks later.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I never went back, and I don't have heart palpitations. I never took the pill. I mean, it was that intense where I just realized this is kind of like, okay, you got to decide.
Mm.
Are you going to continue to drive in this place, drive yourself to a heart attack potentially,
Mhm, mhm.
or are you going to step up and look at what else God is offering you? Because in that moment when I'm feeling inspired and I'm feeling a call, and I was on the board of a nonprofit organization called Daughters of Power, which I just love. It's helping teenage girls in adverse cities, who are living with oftentimes their grandparents because their parents are incarcerated, and I was driving on my lunch hour, an hour to go to their 1 hour teen talk in their high school. And then I would drive back. Just to be able to be there. So I already was taking steps to do what really fueled me to serve. But now it was like that tipping point where it's just like, okay, it's time to cut the cords and burn your boats, as they say, and take the leap. And I did.
How long was it that you felt that stress at the job till you cut the cord?
Oof. Um,
Can you look back and kind of pinpoint that?
yeah, I mean, I was in it for a while before I even knew. I mean, I didn't even know to call it stress. I was just
Mm.
I had such an unconscious part of my life. I didn't know to call it stress. I mean, back then, we're talking back in, gosh, I want to say 2000, probably 2000,
Mm.
2000, maybe even before that, 1999 or whatever, so we didn't have a whole lot of information, we were
Mhm.
just learning computers and they were coming out with all kinds of information, but I didn't know. I
Mhm.
just would go to work. It was when my heart started doing that I realized. I thought, you come in and you work overtime, you work till
Mm.
8 o'clock, and well, the boss said you need to come in till 2, so you do what the boss said.
Mhm.
I didn't even realize that I was what I was signing up for. You know
Mm.
what I mean? I was just doing a thing and I'm like, well, this will make more money,
Mhm.
right? And not even recognizing what it was doing to me.
Right, 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 right. That's such a huge awakening, and I've heard it said, in some coaching circles, and I can't remember who I can credit for this, you probably heard it too, that we're getting information all the time, you got it in your body, your hair was falling out, your heart was beating irregularly. So we get messages all the time to either direct us one way or another, but if we don't get the message, we'll get a lesson. And if we
Right.
don't get the lesson, we'll get a problem. And if we
Mm.
don't get the problem, we'll get the crisis. And I think a lot of times people don't stop till the crisis. They don't
Exactly.
shift gears until the crisis. And so that's really insightful and probably saved your life in some way.
Oh, I believe so, because I've learned since then, my older half brothers have had heart conditions.
Mm.
So I'm like, oh, okay. So I mean, my dad had leukemia, not heart conditions, but apparently it is in the family gene pool. So I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, so yeah, you're probably right. It would have gone down a bad road. I mean, to the point that I didn't even notice the stress. I noticed my hair falling out, but I didn't know to tie it to stress. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? I'm just like,
Mhm.
oh, what's happening? And is it my hormones? I don't know. And it was until the heart started to do that I thought I better check this out. I would be laying, and I wouldn't be doing anything. I'd just be laying on the couch watching TV. But my internal dialogue, I know now because I've done a lot of study around it.
Yeah.
You can be physically fit, you can, do all kinds of stuff, but if your internal world is an upset, it doesn't matter what you eat or how much you exercise.
Mhm.
You may as well drink poison every day. You know what I
Wow.
mean? And I didn't realize. And so that was a big wake up call. And I love that you mentioned that because I think that and I help a lot of high achievers, the ones that are just grind, grind, grind. And we have a society that tells you if you don't freaking grip the steering wheel and have 5 frappa somethings, you're not working hard enough,
Mhm. I know,
you
right?
know? And
Yeah.
so you're shamed into
Mhm.
like, working overtime. And we have a lot of exhausted women. We have men that miss their families.
Mhm.
I mean, both men and women at this point, it's
Yeah.
it's it's the same. And so, and they get to a point where they realize they worked their butts off and don't have the family to show for it,
Right. Right.
and it's just devastating. Or they're having the health conditions that now they need that wake up call. So
Yeah.
my outcome is to help before that happens.
Oh, love it. So you left your job, 2 weeks, gave your notice. Then what? What was the next step for you?
Well, I had talked to my therapist and I told her I really loved what she's doing. I go, yeah, I love what you're doing, but I want to do what you do, but it's a lot of
Mhm.
school and a lot of time.
Mhm. Yeah.
And this was now probably around 2005, I want to say. And she said, "Oh, well, you should be a coach." And I'm like, "Soccer coach? Like, what
Yeah.
are you talking about?" You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it wasn't big back then like it is now.
Mhm.
And she explained, and I looked into it, and I started doing some research. And I'm a more hands-on person, so I ended up going with Coaches Training Institute
Mhm.
because it had half virtual and half on site. And I fell in love with it. As you know, when we go through coaching, we coach ourselves, right? A big part of it is, our stuff comes up and comes
Yeah.
out. And so the more that I dove into it, the more I fell in love with it. And then it's been on and on and on. I mean, training after training after training.
So the first one you did was a CTI.
Mhm.
What was the coaching certification in? Was it life coaching?
Yes.
Yeah.
Coach Training Institute.
Yep. And so I mean, the I started in the same year you did. So it was kind of funny that 2005 when everybody said coach for your life, what is
Yeah,
that? That
exactly.
and so being on the early part of that, I'm guessing you too didn't have a whole lot of people who you could be in cohort with or in community with. I didn't.
No.
And
Mhm.
so it was kind of a interesting road to start with.
Well,
Um,
and I was still in corporate when I did it.
oh, you were, wow.
I was
Okay.
trying to do both.
Wow.
Hence my
Wow.
stress, right?
Sure.
I mean, the stress was already the demand of the job, but I
Yeah.
was also trying to cultivate clients. And back then, things weren't as virtual, right?
Yeah.
You
Right.
met
Phone,
people in
wasn't
a
it?
coffee shop, or yeah, or you went and you met up with them.
Hmm. Hmm.
In fact, when I came into Tony Robbins, I was like, "What do you mean I'm going to coach over the phone? I can't see them. I can't
Right.
see their expressions." And I thought that's going to be really hard. What it ended up doing is heighten my other senses.
Yeah.
So it
Hmm.
was actually really
Hmm.
awesome. And the cool part is I get to coach people from all over the world.
Right.
Yeah.
So, started with CTI, then what was the rest of the journey for you? How did you end up with Tony Robbins as one of your options?
Well, again, trying my best to make a go of my coaching business, because before the heart palpitations, I was, trying to figure out how to grow my practice while I worked at corporate so that I can eventually leave corporate and then do
Right.
it full time,
Right.
right? But when
Right.
you're already working overtime, it's kind of hard to
Mhm.
find the
Mhm.
the hours in
And
the day.
I just want to stop right there. Anybody listening, can you relate to that? So many people are doing their side hustles till they can make their side hustle their main gig, and it is really, really, really hard.
Yeah. And you do one thing I will say is, like, don't give up on your dream. Like,
Mhm.
if there is a dream on your heart, go after it with all you've got and be mindful of the naysayers,
Mhm.
right? There's so many people that have given up on their dreams, and when you go after yours, they try to knock you down, not because they're bad people, just because they've given up on theirs and it's hard for them to watch you go after
Right,
yours,
right, right.
right? So, but don't stop. Don't
Mhm.
stop. At that time, my cousin actually had told me that she worked for Hughes Aircraft at the time, is now Boeing, and she got some tickets to go see this motivational speaker. And it started actually with my sister. My sister she was in real estate, and they always have speakers all the time.
Yep.
She invited me to come, and this guy Matthew Ferry, who was Mike Ferry's
Mhm.
son,
Yep.
had a seminar. And it was the first personal development thing I'd ever seen. And I love that he called the saboteur the drunk monkey.
Yep.
And I thought it was funny. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's funny. And at one point in the seminar, he said, well, my mentor, Tony Robbins, he says blah, blah, blah. And when he said that, I'm like, well, I got to find out who this Tony Robbins dude is, right? It's like, if that's your mentor, I want to
Uh-huh.
go to him.
Uh-huh.
And then it was like a year later or so, my cousin got a ticket to go to UPW. And oh my God, I mean, I went and just my entire world opened up to what was possible.
So
And
tell people what UPW is.
UPW is Tony Robbins' 4-day seminar. It's Unleash the Power Within. And I went, and it just was incredible. It was an incredible experience. It cracked me open in 100 million ways to what's possible. And then I went again the following year. At one point, all 3 of my kids have worked for Tony. I mean, like we went all in. But what ended up happening is, as far as how I became a Tony Robbins coach, is I was still working at corporate. And I just was lit up by the experience. And because I went again, I would see the people there that worked for him. And I was like, what must it be like? Like,
Mm,
all this energy is like so amazing when I'm in this space. What must it be like to work for him? So I started to talk to the guys at the booth.
sure.
And they said, well, well, you would be great, and they had coaching sales and they had coaching. I didn't know there was a difference. But anyway,
Mhm.
they said, you should apply, and I'm like, oh my God, yes. So I sent my resume. And now they get thousands of resumes,
Sure.
right? So I went to another event and I'm like, hey guys, I sent my resume and, I'm not hearing anything. And one of the guys said, just keep bugging. You just got to keep bugging. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay. So nothing. I go to another workshop. And now I don't know if you want me to get into the story, but the story is a great one. Business Mastery, which is his $10,000 program.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I was robbing Peter to pay Paul. I was
Mhm.
coming out of my divorce. I was turned upside down in every freaking way you can imagine. I don't even know if my credit score, if there's a number for it,
Mm.
and I'm still paying my bills by color, but I had these little credit cards that had like $200 and $300 because I was trying to rebuild my credit, right?
Yeah.
And this guy I'm on the phone with tells me I need to go to this so I can build up my coaching practice. And I'm like, well, he said $10,000. I spit up my coffee. I'm like, you're out of
Mhm.
your mind. Like there's no flipping way. And I
Mhm.
always say this because I teach sales too, for people in the sales. When people say, I don't have that money, it was my absolute truth.
Right. Yeah.
But the guy on the phone, he's like, look, if is there any other reason why you wouldn't do this right now to help build your practice? I'm like, no, that's it. I don't have it. He got on the same side of the table with me
Mm.
and he helped me find, I never thought of my 401k.
Mm.
All these years in corporate. And I'm like, I cashed in my 401k. I think I borrowed some money from my mom and I used those little credit cards and I got there. So
Yeah.
here's the thing, $10,000. I told them, look, I gave you everything I've got.
Mhm.
The event was at the Bellagio. I'm like, I cannot afford a room at the Bellagio. So you need to help me find a room,
Yeah.
And so now I'm desperately waiting. He's like, okay, let me get on it. He gets on it and I'm like, what am I going to do? And I'm like, I lived in California at the time. I said, you know what? I'm going to drive to Vegas. I went to 24-Hour Fitness and downloaded their free weekly pass. And I was going to sleep in my car and
Oh
shower
my
at the gym.
goodness. Wow.
And I'm like, I got to do what I have to. And I'm sharing this with you guys because, again, pay whatever price your dream asks,
Mm.
right? I thought this was going to be the end all be all for me to get my coaching practice off the ground. And the guy made me believe that. And I believed it was true because
Yeah.
Tony's got a great reputation.
Right.
But I also knew that I had submitted my resume and I hadn't heard, right? And I'm like, maybe the director of coaching will be at the event. Who
Mhm.
knows, right? I hadn't had that thought totally, but I was just like, I got to go. So for some reason, I've got to go. And so, so right before, as I was leaving, the sales guy called me back and he said, look, it's okay. I asked my wife. She said, it's fine. I have a double in my room. If you want to share the room, I'll charge you $25 a night or
Wow.
whatever. And I'm like, done. Now I know Tony Robbins events, you don't spend a whole lot of time in your room.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Right. So I'm like, let's do it. So luckily I did get a room. I didn't have to stay in my car, but I was ready to.
Right.
Now, making a long story short, I got to the event and again, I went to the sales guys. I'm like, guys, I sent my resume. I still haven't heard that you have to keep bugging. I'm like, well, I don't want to be a pest. They're like, no, you need to be a pest. I'm like, oh, right, whatever. And then one of the guys goes, well, the director of coaching is here, right? I'm like, he is. And at that point, I was like, I could barely remember his name. I was Mark Vaughn something, but I was like laser focused looking at everybody's tag on their
Yeah.
lapel. And it's a 6-day event. And I'm like, every day I'm looking, I'm not finding, it's like, 7,000 people.
Right.
And so then at one point we had to go on a lunch break, and I'm like, I can't afford lunch at the Bellagio. So what am I going to do?
Mhm.
So I walked to this little cafe, and it had $10 salads. I'm like, okay, cool. I went in there, and I'm standing in line, and in front of me, there's 3 people talking, and they're talking about the event. And so I'm kind of listening in. They're talking about the event. Oh, that's cool. And again, I look down at the tags, and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, oh my God, that's him. I think that's him. And so I'm freaking out. And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, this is a whole new me. I'm like shy. I'm introverted. I'm like, and I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? Well, I'm at a Tony Robbins event. So my inner voice goes, step up, Jessie, step up.
Nice.
And they ordered something. I walked up, and I was freaking out. I don't even know what I ordered. And he was still talking. They were still having the conversation. I walked up and I said, I'm so sorry to interrupt. My name is Jessie Torres. I gave you my resume.
I love it.
And he said, you know what? I do remember you. You speak Spanish, don't you? And I said, yes, I do. And we talked for like 20 minutes.
Wow.
And the last thing he said to me is, I will call you. And he did.
Oh my goodness. Okay, this is so good, Jessie, because you are demonstrating right now the power of manifestation, of commitment, of putting all your eggs in one basket, like almost literally. Uh,
Perseverance.
yes, perseverance, all these things that have people stop, have had
Mhm.
me stop. I mean, I have stopped, and the story, I mean, well, there's more to the story, but at that point right there, is it just a happy accident? Is it a coincidence that he happens to be at the cafe you go to, and that, oh my goodness, you get a $25 room? Are all those coincidences, or how do you resolve that, Jessie?
If you want me to go down this hole,
I do.
I really bring some science to this. Okay, so woo woo, whatever you want to call it. I think woo woo is planted on there because we know we're onto something.
Yeah, I agree.
We are all energetic beings. Okay. We talk about energy, frequency, vibration, right? Our heart is beating. Yes or no?
Yes.
Why do the doctors grab a stethoscope to listen to the frequency of your heart? Okay. That frequency is emitting a vibration, right? The vibration is emitting a frequency,
Mhm.
right? So we all have what we call a torus field, which is the energetic frequency that emits from the rhythm of our heart. Okay. Just like sound waves, when you turn on the radio, is it here? No, it's in the air, right? It's in the space. It's being translated through your phone to your earbuds, right? So our energetic field is connected to our heart. So if we're stressed, if we're frustrated or angry or whatever, it's got a chaotic rhythm. That's why if you're standing at Starbucks and some guy's on the freeway, gets cut off, almost gets in an accident, his buddy calls him and says, we just lost $1 million deal. His wife texted, I want a divorce. And now he's standing behind you in Starbucks. Would you feel it?
Yeah, yeah, you would.
Right? The hair on the back of your neck would stand up. You know why? Why? Because the measurable torus field from each human being is measurable by science 3 to 4 feet. It looks like a donut. It falls out, comes out, comes back up, comes back out. So we touch each other, we affect each other, that energetic field.
Mhm.
Our world has an energetic field. When we're in a community of people that are in a very heavy, very weighted energy, you can start to feel funky. You don't even know why. Conversely, in a very excitable space and energy, you feel like uplifted and happy. It's so important. And we can go down another conversation around the friends and the people that you surround yourself with, right? But when it comes to manifestation, the vibrational frequency with where you live is what will come to you.
Mhm.
So back in the day when I went through the abuse with my father, I adopted the identity of somebody that is to be ashamed of. And I walked with shame. I was gross, filthy. Nobody will ever love me. With that belief system, I will attract to me somebody who will prove me right.
Mhm.
Right? Because the universe just delivers what you put out. It's like a sonar. I'm putting out, oh, I'm a victim. I'm gross. I'm ugly. Oh, he has lack of self-worth, but he goes at it from control.
Mhm.
Oh, you feel unworthy? Cool. I can control you.
Yep.
You don't feel strong enough to see your own power? Great. We're a perfect match. Right. And so that's the power of manifestation. What is it you want? Set your goal, set your heart. think about it every day, not just think about it, but feel the feeling as though it's already happened. And it will, the universal law of reciprocity, it will come back. It will come back to you. And the universal law of resonance, right? If your body is a resonance space for what it is you want, you will attract it.
Mm.
You will attract it. It's the law. It's physics.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's why when you say I was determined to find this person. I was determined to get on the team. I wanted to get on the team. So it started with the resume. It started with me being in proximity. It started with me trusting that this was where I needed to be, asking questions, getting up in the front of the line and going, what's going on? Like I've sent my resume, right? And all of it setting in motion. It's not an accident.
Yeah.
When you set your target and you vibrate every day as though it's there, it starts to get through you. It's already in the field.
Yeah. This is so, I'm hoping that my listeners are hearing the resonance between everything we've talked about here for 230 episodes, because it's not an accident. It's not a coincidence. The only reason any of these things are coincidental is because they're happening at the same time the way they should. That's what coincident means. It doesn't mean, oh my gosh, that was so crazy. No, it's
Right.
coincident. It needs to happen that way. Like you said, scientifically, physics related. I mean, this is how it works. So when you talk about when anybody talks about manifestation, given the science that you've just described, is there like magic to it in your
Well,
experience?
I mean, I think it's all magical because it seems crazy, right?
Yeah.
Like when you vibrate in abundance, yet you're looking at your bank account.
Mm,
Now you look at your bank account and you can feel contraction. You're shutting up that door, right? So
mm,
we are abundant. Abundance oftentimes is tied to money only.
mm,
Talk to somebody with COPD. You have an abundance of breath. They don't.
right.
Right? We're abundant in 100 ways, and the universe only reads vibration. So if you're vibrating at abundant, I can feel 100 ways that I'm abundant, but we don't know. So we're tying abundance to only one thing. And then every time we look at the one thing, we contract.
Right.
So the universe says, well, every time she looks at this thing, she contracts. So let's not give her any of that. So you're literally repelling the
Yeah.
very thing you want.
Right.
And I think the secret or the magic little sprinkle on the end of all of this is gratitude.
Yeah.
Gratitude being the ultimate seal of receivership,
Mm,
meaning if I say thanks in advance, my body will already behave chemically as though it's true, right? Because our body is just a faithful servant, right? It's like if I look at a beach and I feel serene and calm and peace and the grace of God, and then I'm in my body responds, right? Now I'm in my office a day later and I close my eyes and I imagine that same sunset, my body's going to respond as though I'm looking at it
mhm,
because it doesn't know.
right.
So the minute you bring your dream that much closer and you see it in vivid color happening, and then you give thanks, your body's like, oh, we already have this. Oh, we already have this. Thank you. And that brings it that much closer.
So good. You've done a super amazing job of just explaining this really, like you said earlier, this woo concept in ways that I think it's hard to argue with unless you're committed to your limitations.
That's right.
And then people get right about that too, right? This doesn't work. This is stupid.
Right.
Look how powerful you are. It's just doesn't work, right? So you kind of are alluding to heart math. Heart math is one of your certifications as well.
Mhm.
And I don't know a ton about it, but I think you've just kind of described it, haven't you? The way your heart.
Absolutely, yes. The Institute of Heart Math is incredible. They've studied the rhythm of the heart for the last 30 to 40 years. And yeah, I love it so much because it helped me bridge a spiritual thing or a etheric thing to a physical world,
Mm,
right? When they study the heart and what's actually happening. And when I talk about, the heart rate variability monitor, and when you measure stress, frustration, sadness, worry, all of those, you're seeing your heartbeat in a radical way that it's not meant to.
mhm,
Coherence is the state of bum, 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 bum. And what happens in that, you get that quickly from gratitude, compassion, love, appreciation, care, all of these. And I say this because we do this whole grid demonstration of depleting emotions and renewing emotions.
Mm.
Depleting, because we don't say emotions are positive or negative, they just are,
Right.
right? Anger is not negative only if you live there,
Mhm.
right? If somebody's coming in to rape me, I sure heck hope I can access some anger, right?
Mhm.
It'll do me good.
Mhm.
But when you start to live in anger, frustration, sadness, worry, shame, whatever, that depletes your system.
Yeah.
Your system is now in emergency, trying to save your life from you.
Mhm.
Because you're in, and when you're in any of those emotions, you're jacking your cortisol levels, and your body's now in sympathetic, so it's in fight or flight,
Right.
and now your heart is having to compensate, and so your body goes into a state of emergency. So conversely, on the flip side, your autonomic nervous system, it's now moving fluidly because you're in love or gratitude or appreciation or compassion or any of those emotions. You activate DHEA, which actually eats cortisol like Pac-Man.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, and you regulate your nervous system. And when you do that, you open up the door to universal intelligence, like aha moments or God or a grace or, oh, I got it. I got a solution. You get resourceful because you're now in communication with what is true. That's the beautiful frequency of that love vibration that opens up that channel with
Mhm.
whatever it is your belief is, to come in and step in some divine intervention and say, okay, here it is. I can give it to you now because you opened. Over here in contraction, you literally shut that door.
Right.
So
Right.
when we talk about manifestation and gratitude and living in a state of gratitude, gratitude is a healing emotion. It
Mhm.
literally can shift the trajectory of any disease. And that's another whole rabbit hole.
Well, and there are many amazing rabbit holes in this, and there are two that I want to touch on before we run out of time here. And one is you've kind of alluded to what I'm going to call a calling. You know, it's a spiritual dimension of the vocation that you've chosen or has chosen you, whichever way you want to look at that. You alluded to God. You alluded to I'll call it spirituality without limiting it. And then the name of your company is Fierce Grace. So it occurs to me that there's probably a connection there as well.
There is actually. And, as we talk about energy, all of us have the power of the masculine and the feminine, right? We all have it in us. For some of us, we drive more from our feminine. For some of us, we drive more from our masculine. The problem is when we're driving from one or the other that isn't our core essence, and we get exhausted.
Mm.
Now, the beauty, and I see it like an infinity symbol, the beauty is being able to navigate through both at the time of need. I live predominantly in my feminine, but when I have to get things accomplished, masculine, get up here, let's go after the mission, right? And I can dance in both, and that's what we're meant to do. But nowadays, especially women, we've fought so hard to prove that we could do it all.
Yeah.
And God bless us, we can.
Mhm.
But we've swung the pendulum the other way, and we have a lot of exhausted, burned out women. And honestly, our men are they're confused. They're like, should I help you with your groceries or will I be insulting you? I
Right.
don't know
Yeah.
anymore.
Mhm.
And I have the honor of having twin sons that are 38 and my daughter's 35. So I have both, and I've been able to be witness to the pendulum both ways, and we got to come back to balance. So Fierce Grace is not only the spiritual connection, but it's the connection of knowing and understanding who we are. It's spirit and human. And in us lives an essence of masculine, feminine. It's the polarity of life. We don't know light without dark, right? We don't know positive without negative. And so we have both of these essences. How do we come back to our equilibrium? How do we come back to our center, the beauty, the divinity within, our true essence? Because whatever's had us shift has been from a state of survival.
Yeah.
If I speak to women directly, we are assessing safety most of our lives.
Mhm.
Most of our lives, we're on a constant having to assess safety. In fact, I heard this speaker, he had a room full of 200 women, and he asked a question: if God took all the men off the planet, what would be the first thing you do? And one of the ladies raised her hand and she said, I'd go jogging at 11 o'clock at night.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was such a like, oof, like you're right. Like men don't have to think about that. I
Mhm.
mean, some do, but they don't really. They just go, I'm just gonna go for a run. We like better pack the mace, better pack,
Mhm,
you know what, maybe I
mhm,
shouldn't. Maybe I'll go in the morning,
mhm,
when there's light. So we're constantly assessing safety. And so, and then we've been hurt, and then we have all kinds of things. So instead of cultivating safety, what we've learned is hypervigilance. We're
sure.
walking around going, don't you dare, right? Because we've been hurt. So I get it. But I believe that we've built heart armor. We have built armor around our hearts so much, we're afraid to open back up.
Mhm,
And the unfortunate part about that is that to have a closed, armored heart is a setup for suffering,
mhm.
because somewhere in there is the Jessie, and she's not here. She's
Yeah.
in there somewhere behind all the armor. And when we aren't able to be unapologetically or unauthentically ourselves, we're in suffering. We're a state of imposter syndrome, or we're believing that whoever loves us only because they don't know the real me,
Mhm.
and that's where we go into depression and suffering. So it's a lot there.
Oh, Jesse, we could have 5 sessions like this to just, share all your wisdom. Who are your ideal clients, and what do you enjoy doing the most as it relates to your work?
Oof, great question. My ideal clients are those that have reached their peak of like stress, like the me of the past, right? You're exhausted, you're tired, but also you know that there's something greater for you. You know that there's another level that you're wanting to reach. Maybe you have the career, you have the car and the boats, and kids' college fund is paid or whatever, but there's another level to you. And you find yourself in a state of dormancy that
Mm,
you've normalized, right? And so you're just kind of burned out. You're just doing Groundhog Day, the same thing, and you know that there's something meant for you.
mm,
And so it's those high achievers, those business owners, those entrepreneurs that are wanting another level of life, because I believe that the leaders of tomorrow are the most authentic, the most congruent, the most aligned. And so I want to help get you there.
mm,
And part of Fierce Grace is not only accessing the essence of who we are, but it's taking whatever pain we have and alchemizing it into something beautiful,
mm.
something powerful, because there's something there on the other side of that pain. I don't believe God wastes the pain. I believe we do if we
Yeah,
choose to.
yeah, that's great. So men, women, it doesn't matter to you?
That's right.
Okay.
Mhm.
And what gives you the most joy in the work you're doing?
Ugh, bringing back the innocence to a human being,
Mm,
the innocence of a child. There's nothing more beautiful than when they fall in love with themselves so much. It's like their cheeks drop, like they're no longer tight and tense. And there's this beauty to seeing that innocence come back where they just come alive.
mm,
Right. And they love life, and they wake up with joy and laughter, and they notice the birds chirping, and they're giddy over the rain because they get to go jump puddles. Back when we were children, when it was all so beautiful.
yeah.
We are now so stressed out, and we have an exhausted world. And I think that the more we can bring back this pendulum and find our equilibrium, and even the feminine. I mean, I work predominantly with women, but I have a leadership program called Army of Angels where I bring both men and women to now be leaders of tomorrow. So there's a variety of ways to work with me. But I'm really passionate about helping women really come back to our beautiful sensual self. Sensuality has been given a bad rap. I'm not talking about sexuality, I'm talking about sensuality. They're very different.
Mhm,
And I think that when we awaken to our true beauty, our true essence, now how do we embody it? How do
mm,
we live there?
mm,
Right? It's like if you did weight loss, you had a 200-pound woman and now she's 120 pounds. She's elated, but she doesn't know how to get that attention. She doesn't know, "Ooh, that's contracting and it's scary." So now they put the weight back on. You know what I mean?
sure.
So as women, when we release all the armor that we have and we learn how to cultivate safety versus walk around with our fists up,
Mhm,
um, there's such a magnificence to the feminine, such a magnificence to being heart centered and being in love. And I think we can bring back our world.
I love that. So are you looking for individual coaching clients? Are you looking for speaking engagements? What is it that you would like to promote right now?
Speaking engagements is definitely on my docket to get on as many stages as possible. I believe this message is important. And for all you listeners, here's the thing, like, it isn't about me. It's about, I love Ram Dass's quote, right? We're all just walking each other home, right? And so I am just on a different part of the path. And so my outcome is to help you walk on that journey in a way that expedites your healing so that you don't have to go 20 years to figure out what I figured out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Let's close that gap and let's get there now. And so I'm committed to waking up as many people as possible to this beauty, to this essence. I mean, we got AI now replacing humans. We gotta capture our essence. We gotta recognize who we are and know that that's the one thing they cannot duplicate is our essence.
Very
But if
good.
we don't know what that is, like I didn't when I was 38, then we're lost and we're becoming sheeple and we're being herded in the direction with where they want us to go. So my invitation is it's time to wake up. So speaking is something that is predominantly in my space. I'll give you my website and it has the opportunity to choose how you want to work with me
Okay.
because I have one-on-one coaching. I have my course with Fierce Grace. I also have Tundra Warrior Chicas, which is a women's mastermind, and Army of Angels, which is all about leadership. So there's a variety of ways, but speaking, I say, would be my number one right now.
Awesome. So what is that website?
I am fiercegrace.com.
Nice. I'm just writing it down. We'll make sure it's in the show notes. Jessie, this has been so much fun. And
Yes.
I appreciate you so much. I appreciate the work you're doing. You are living now in Texas. I'm living in North Dakota. So if we continue to do our important work, we can take care of the middle part of the country.
Yes, we can. I love that.
Send our energy to each other in that space. And I just really, really appreciate us connecting. And
Likewise.
thank you so much for being my guest
Absolutely.
today.
I'm happy to be here. And if anybody needs help, know that when you schedule a call with me, it's totally free. Let's have a conversation. Let's just see where you're at and see if we can bridge the gap to where you want to go.
Perfect. Perfect. And as you know, everyone, at the end of every show, we just say it's your opportunity to get real, because that's what this podcast is all about. Radical, energized, authentic, and learning focused. And when we get real, it's uncovering that place that Jessie's been talking about that is there behind the armor and behind the negativity that we've thought we have to shore ourselves up with. That's what it means to get real. So let's find ways to do that this week, everybody. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
And thank you,
Jody.
Jessie. I'll hit stop.